Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a little bit of a historical piece here today, where we will be discussing crafting, back from the PSP version. Alright, so when you hear somebody say that crafting was improved in Tactics Ogre Reborn, oftentimes what may come up is this thought that, well, it just simply improved on one aspect, that it maybe improved the UI, maybe improve the general fluidity of a certain system, maybe it just kind of improved the feedback that you were getting, right? But this is, I feel, one of those cases of many mechanics that oftentimes may seem like a simple change in Tor, that were really more of a complete system-wide rework. So this is just kind of a fun one to explore. So what are we looking at here? So when we look at crafting in Tactics Ogre Reborn, effectively what you're doing is you're getting a hold of some crafting books, you go over to the crafting menu, and you just craft the thing, right? Well, this is oftentimes the layer that's kind of assumed when we take a look at something like the PSP version. The folks are looking at it and saying, okay, so they made it so that you can just buy the stuff from the crafting menu instead of buying it from the store. Kind of. To some extent, that is correct, but let's look at just how many things got improved here. For one thing, I can hit square and go to the left or right and nothing will happen, because we have no preview of what this weapon will do. The upgraded version and the default version of a weapon have the exact same description, so we have no way to know whether this is actually going to change anything or not. We just have a rough idea of like, okay, this thing's going to use a Dynasty King's Mead, maybe it'll inflict a breach on hit. I don't know. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll just go and use a basic piece of equipment from the store, sometimes they will require you to get a rare drop. So for example, it's weird how at the very start of the game here, when you're going and doing some of your upgrades, if you want to, for example, get a full strike item, you would have to get a Hanged Man card in order to upgrade your rapier, but by the time you get to something like the Tiger Bagnai, you're using magic for that. By the time you get over to your Glamour, you're using a debuff item for it. It's pretty much universally either magic or debuff items in Tor, but in this one, occasionally, yeah, you just had to have very rare components that only could sometimes drop, and that's only if it hit that particular drop table, which is why, for example, something like that Rapier +1 oftentimes just went completely by the wayside, because you didn't necessarily have any guarantee of having one of these Hanged Man cards. That in this version, you ended up picking up those cards and using them as a sort of redundant version of the debuff items. So And it's funny because they had this system in here apparently fearing that people wouldn't go to the shop. Personal experience from teaching new players to play this game, that was 100% well-founded. But they just gave you more of those debuff items in Tor. In this one, they're like, what if we have this completely separate menu, and it just hangs out at the bottom of the menu, and that's where people will go when they're panic searching. So if they get a unit stuck somewhere that they can't get out, and they don't want to understand how Litten works, let's give them the ability to overwrite that with Fly or Teleport or something. Which is funny, because it actually doesn't overwrite it, it just kind of leaves them stuck, so now they can teleport, they just can't teleport anywhere. But yeah, so you'd have to have rare drops for some of these pieces of equipment. It's kind of funny, and some of them are weirdly expensive for what they are. So it's funny because like the mage staff was kind of a meme back in this version, because by the time you could upgrade the mage staff, oftentimes you ended up having the option to get way better stuff. In Tor, they actually finally justified this by having it be a kind of early game range upgrade that you could upgrade to range +2. Finally justifying the weirdly expensive crafting materials to make this thing. I'm not entirely sure why they decided this was the way to go for it in this one, because you really don't get much extra for it. But anyways, that's just kind of a funny thing there. But here's the thing. Here's the actual kind of main upgrade that happened here. You'll notice we haven't even gotten to the crafting itself. Let's go ahead and cover the crafting books. Because you know how you'll occasionally hear somebody say that it was way more immersive to look at the far corners of the world to go get a hold of their crafting books and such? Like before, let's say something like the bow or axe, spear, and hammer were located in Farampa Wildwood. You had a redundant copy of leg guards and I think like shieldcraft or something in Pirate's Graveyard. And then every one of the fortresses happened to have a couple of crafting books. I think in the case of Lausanne it was 3. One of them was 3, the other one was 2. But here's the thing. When you went through, you got a chance to get 2 of them. There was a decent chance that you wouldn't get the second one unless you had your particular class levels at level 30, because you had to level your classes. So already where this crafting system is touching the leveling system, it's touching the map, it's touching the builds that people are doing, and we haven't even gotten to the actual crafting itself yet. But let's go ahead and continue on. So yeah, in every one of these fortresses, again, you were guaranteed one, but you were not guaranteed the second one, meaning that you may not be able to get the second one until you complete the entire Elemental Temple side quest and go back there and then try to farm the guy for drops, at which point, unless you were above 30, you weren't guaranteed to get some of them anyway. Why? Who knows? But anyways, let's go ahead and go back to the actual crafting itself now. So this basically means that a Damask sword that you pick up in Chapter 4, in Tor, if you take a quick dip into Palace of the Dead and make it down to floor 30, you probably have the means to go ahead and upgrade this, because that's where that thing is located. And this one, it's instead located on a random night down here in this fortress, on the 3rd floor here. And you'll notice also in Tor, they have redundant drops across multiple maps to get these crafting books. In this one, there is one unit that spawns some of the time that has a rare chance to drop the book. There's nothing special about these particular units, there's nothing that makes them stick out. Axe, Spear, and Hammer is on a random rune fencer that spawns like maybe 30% of the time in the middle of Farampa Wildwood. That guy you might accidentally kill a couple of times and get on accident. Since this game released, I've had that happen once. The bow spawns on an archer at the very end of Farampa Wildwood, and it's one of the last units that you may run into, and you probably get sick and tired of that map and throw that guy off a cliff. So there's a pretty decent chance you're not getting that. Bowed Fortress is a bit more likely, because something like the Fusel upgrades are going to be a unit that's kind of off to the side of the map, so it probably won't get stolen. But for example, something like the Throwing Book in Palace of the Dead is on a Beast Tamer, that if you kill that Beast Tamer immediately, it's almost guaranteed it's going to get immediately stolen, if it even drops in the first place. And it's actually a similar thing with this knight here, that they actually are in the middle of a crowd, on a staircase that gets used by a lot of different units. So it's pretty rare that you're going to get any of these books in the first place. So yeah, obviously the answer was, okay, people may not be doing the Elemental Temple side quest, they might not know it even exists, and they want to at least experience elemental weapons, so in order to get them, you make it to floor 30 of Palace of the Dead, and most of your basics are going to be over there. I personally like to headcanon that Roderick had reset the timeline and just kind of collected some of those books over there in a library, but you do you. It feels good to see all of those books dropping at once, feels good to see all of those unique drop icons and stuff like that. This version was tedious as hell, but let's say you finally managed to get a hold of that book after a tremendous amount of effort, and what is this upgrade going to give you? Okay, cool. So we picked up this book, and we want to, let's say, make an ice blade, right? So what do we need to make this ice blade? We're going to need ice crystals, we're going to need babo wood, we're going to need woods, we're going to need steel. Fantastic. Okay, so let's go down the list. What do we need in order to make steel? Well, we cannot just simply tell it to make the thing. That would be too easy. So we go over to steel, and what do we need to make steel? Okay. We need to have iron ingots, and we need to have graphite. We need 2 iron ingots and 1 graphite to make steel. To make iron ingots, we need to make iron ore. Okay, so we need 6 iron ore to make that steel bar. So let's go ahead and make that real quick. And you'll notice we have an entire crafting animation for each one, because we have no option to select multiples of doing anything. This is usually the main thing that's actually cited as being tremendously annoying about this version. Because you'll notice right now, this is a very basic piece of equipment. In fact, a lot of the mid-game pieces of equipment are simply combinations of iron, steel, and something else in order to be made, annoyingly constantly alternating between what takes 2 and what takes 1. So oftentimes what will end up happening is that you'll take a look at these things and it's like, okay, I can't remember what happens, and so you just kind of average out to making 2 of everything for each one. So again, while you can keep a perfect mental checklist or whatnot, that's usually what's going to end up happening. But okay, so we made our graphite, we made our iron, we go down to iron, And you might have noticed for a second that one of those numbers flashed red. Why did it flash red? Well, because in this version, you don't have guaranteed success on your crafts. There's two different types of success chances that can actually happen. So you'll notice right here, it is a black number that says 95 to 99% when going and crafting pieces of equipment here. Effectively, what this is saying is that there is anywhere as low as 95 up to 99% chance that you will be able to successfully craft this thing. You may at any time just have a 5% chance that your stuff just explodes for no reason and all of that effort was for nothing. Okay, so with steel, okay, that took a while. It took a couple minutes. It's annoying. How bad is it to make some woots? Okay, actually, before we even get to woots, let's go ahead and move on to the other ones real quick. So we needed to get some crystals, right? We needed to make some ice crystals. So in order to make crystals, we need crystallos. We need 3 crystallos, and those have a 5% chance or 6% chance to fail. So to make those, we need boulder. So we'll go ahead and make some boulder right now, and it looks like we're going to need a few of those per each one. You'll notice that we are burning 2 inferior ore every time we're doing this, and we only have a pile of around 40 of them left at the moment. Usually what you would do at the start of your crafting journey here was to go buy an entire pile of them of 99 inferior ore at a price of around 6,400. At which point you would then proceed to burn through that entire pile extremely quickly as you're going through. Anyway, we've got our crystal here. Let's go over to our Codex of Gems, and let's go ahead and take a look at our ice crystal. Okay, so this has a 64 to 70% chance of success. This is already starting to look pretty dicey. That's not great. So either way, thankfully, we managed to get that dice roll. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, save and reload. Correct. That is how people did this. That is exactly how people did this, because it is painful to do it the way that it was sort of developer intended. Okay, so what else did we need to make this thing? Well, I don't know. Let's go ahead and double check. So in order to make another one of these, we need baboa wood. That's pretty easy. So let's go down to timber, and let's go ahead and make some baboa wood. Fantastic. This also has a chance to fail, which is, again, kind of pointless considering all it's doing is consuming 4 logs. Anyway, like, literally all it does is waste your time, so then we go over to the Codex of Ores. How bad is it to make woods? Well, we need 2 steel and we need 2 boulder. Okay, so how bad is it to make boulder? In order to make boulder, we need silver ingots, we need crystals ore, we need boulder ore. So we need, in total, then we need to have, like, 4 extra, or no, we need 6, 7, I don't know, whatever, shitload of extra crystallos ore, 6 extra iron ingots, and then, actually, no, we need potentially 7 in case it decides to fail. Anyway, lots of boulder ore as well. So we just go ahead and kind of ballpark it, because at this point, this is when you start mentally fizzling out. It's like, I don't know, just throw rocks at it until something farts out. So we're just going and upgrading and upgrading and upgrading and upgrading. So we're just going to, again, just make like 6 boulder ore, give or take, somewhere in that ballpark. We're going to start making a ton of extra steel. So we're going to go ahead and make 12 extra iron ingots. Then we also need 6 extra silver ore. We're also going to need some graphite on top of that. Like, you see how much of a pain in the ass this is? Every part of this system absolutely blew. And the problem is that if you forget to save in between, you are going back and you are redoing all of this because your stuff just got deleted. All you're doing is losing money when this happens. And if you're playing by an Iron Man rule set, which is what I did for this particular save file, which was extremely tedious, please don't do it, it's just kind of how it goes, you know? It's annoying, but you eventually get it done. And so we'll just go ahead and speed it up at this point because, like, you get the idea. Because after all of this, you have a coin flip as to whether or not it'll even finally succeed in the end anyway, right? And nowadays, sure, we have the means to go and fast forward through this, but back in the day, no, we didn't. Additionally, it's funny because it also affects your drops and such. So when it asks you whether or not you want to sell your coins, it's because you had coins in this menu of reagents alongside a million other things. In this particular case, we'll just go ahead and just sell some random equipment or whatnot. And we'll go ahead and go over to our inferior ores and get our, or rather 6,800, not 6,400, my bad, it's been a hot minute. Anyways, so let's go over to our ores again, and we are back to crafting silver ore. Hell yeah, are we not having fun yet? Dang right we are. You'll notice occasionally you'll get a free, like, extra mercy drop when you're going and doing this, which is all well and good. It's nice when that happens. It does not happen most of the time, but it's nice when it does. And so yeah, you craft these. Oftentimes you'll end up accidentally crafting too many, and then you'll have to go back and then craft the basic stuff again. There's so many points of failure on this particular system that it's, again, just bizarre anyone made this in the first place. And what's funny is that, believe it or not, this is exactly why the Rogue exists. So the Rogue, there was a lot said about the Rogue getting removed in Tactics Ogre Reborn because there wasn't enough time, and that's actually the other kind of rabbit hole. I already did a video on that, over just how many things their mechanics ended up affecting in this entire system, to the point that Tor probably would have never released if it wasn't for that Rogue being cut, because it affected every single drop table in the entire game, affected every map in the entire game to some extent, over a mechanic that was basically rarely used in this version. So like the Rogue in the original PSP version here, in this one, the Rogue effectively steals parts for equipment. It doesn't actually steal the equipment itself. So like it was an FFT that they stole equipment. It's in this one that they just stole crafting materials. So like early kind of maps that you were going through and stealing equipment, you might get some inferior ore, you might get some silver ore, some iron ore, whatever else. And so that saved you a tiny bit of time when you were going and crafting. And then later on, you get to ranks like 3 and 4 and such, and it's like, oh, you can steal entire iron bars or steel bars and stuff like that. Fantastic. You end up maxing out the skill, and you can steal some woots from some endgame enemies. It's like, holy shit, this saves so much time. Now, granted, you probably end up losing just as much time actually training up the steel skill, because it is surprisingly expensive. So there's that. So I got like my Piers guy over here with his steel skill and almost nothing else going on. He's just joined the team, apparently. He was primarily just a crossbow guy. And in his particular case, he ends up just going and kind of shooting everything here. What the hell happened with the save file? Do I still have... I think I might still have a few of the codes active now that I'm looking at it. Hold on. Let's see. Because we got... I was doing that test video not that long ago. I think I just forgot to disable all here. Anyway. Because they aren't all supposed to have skill points active. Not that it necessarily affects this video much. But still, like, this guy stole a couple of things over the course of his entire playthrough. The one that I did where there was a thief that ended up getting used a decent bit more. They maxed out by like rank 4 by the time that I finally was using them for a while. It was just really tedious to use rogues for stealing anything. But again, they at least kind of had that time save component to them. Anyways, though, so let's go ahead and finally go to the shop and make that piece of equipment to get a general idea over whether or not it'll actually succeed, because it'll probably end up failing. Because after all that, 57 to 63% chance, and this one is locked in, and so it failed. So all of that effort was completely for nothing, right? And so what's funny is that if it's red, it's potentially a movable number. If it's black, it's locked in at the time. And the way that these numbers go is that it's determined by the not the lowest, but the highest base stats in your party. So the higher that you cheese your base stats up, the higher your success chance at crafting. Meaning that if you have one character that's completely maxed out in terms of their stats, now suddenly, like, hell, you could friggin' go get a dragon, max out its stats by going and repeatedly feeding it other dragons, and also having it switch between the different colors of dragons to give it a bunch of free extra stats, and everyone just gets better at crafting because they're just so inspired by this dragon now. It's weird. It's really weird. Because again, all of this still is all of this crafting stuff is also affected by this leveling system, because all of your units are leveling up at the same time, courtesy of the class level thing. But every time they level up, they're still getting increases to their base stats. So like, if we take a look at the unit, over here, we'll see that we have, on the left, we're going to have their base stats, on the right are their derived stats that are their class added on top of whoever they are already. And so, oftentimes, again, what you'd end up seeing is that your crafting odds would improve over time, but it may be extremely unclear why. But then, realistically speaking, once all said and done, you'll notice, like, oh, it's actually just because we have, we have these base stats that are going up. It was a very, very strange system, but, it is what it is. Now, the thing was that there was a very, very incredibly wide disparity in terms of just how good these different pieces of anything could be. Just because they could mean something entirely different. Like, you'll notice that on this particular save file, even with having almost everybody upgraded in terms of their crafting, I don't have iceberg swords on Ozma, despite it being a nearly twofold upgrade, because it just simply was too much of a pain in the ass back in the day to bother. And oftentimes, whenever you'd finally get that upgrade, that unit became pretty insanely overpowered. because in this one there were no elemental strengths and weaknesses. It was simply a case of that unit is just, kind of strong in a default state because they are improving with that element, and unless something is specifically resisting that element, they're going to effectively just break that unit. Additionally, there were some things that didn't exist in Reborn and or were handled differently. So like, let's say elemental bows. In this version, you just had your basic bows that would more or less drop off by the time you got to Chapter 4, and then you had your elemental longbows, and those things were beyond busted. So like you saw right there, that is a longbow with a chance to shackle. This is a debuff that does not exist anymore in Reborn, because all of them just got merged together into stop, but you had bind, shackle, and stop in this one, bind being kind of broken legs, shackle being broken arms, and then your... your shackle being... Wait, did I say broken arms? Yeah, stop is just stop. Anyway, so ultimately, what this means is that once you got elemental longbows, a lot of stuff just became insane. And frankly, even your short bows were already insanely strong in this version. Like, just out of the box, a regular, like, Baldur short bow in the post-game right now is still able to take a quarter health off a unit like no trouble. When it comes to the elemental longbows, they became oppressively powerful. Same thing for the crossbows, because again, they were just kind of upgrading in a straight line. So like, what you had with the Camilles there was a weapon that could combine and augment, which is basically like giving it a whole second weapon rank. So you could effectively add a whole bunch of extra damage to this longbow. The thing could functionally ignore armor, which is why it did so much damage there because of that extra augment rank. And on top of this, would then additionally have the chance to break that unit's arms on contact. So oftentimes, again, it just got really comical really darn quick. So that's not to say that there wasn't fun stuff to do in this system. Like, this is an interesting thing to mess around with. It's just that everything was super tedious in that particular way. Like, it's one of those reasons that I praised Reborn so much, because it basically managed to translate a lot of the tedious versions of this into something that's more fun. Like, you get your elemental weapons, and they're just automatically good based off what element is using them versus what elements they're swinging them against. It's quick, it's intuitive, it's understandable. It's a very kind of doable system. Whereas in this one, there were a lot of cases where, like, I used this example before, but like this particular guy, he's really good in a normal sense. We get into San Bronza, and there's a random level jump part of the way through. Because of the way that weapon ranks, crafting equipment, everything else are balanced against each other, this meant that there was a certain point when there was a level jump, as well as an equipment jump on the enemy side, that he went from doing hundreds to doing ones, with what is effectively an endgame weapon, because he didn't, for example, have the right necklace on him, or didn't have the right augment for it, and stuff like that. Whereas in other cases, like right here, we have Ozma, who potentially has a dual-wielded sword setup, who, right out of the gate with no additional grinding and a weapon that you could commonly find on the ground, is able to near one-shot or potentially double overkill most things on the map here. So, like, it's... Again, it's nutty how augments and craftables and everything else affected this version. Now, this is just the basic stuff. I should point out that there's a few other things to consider for this as well, because many of those craftables additionally also changed what it was that they like how they were made. So let's go back to those bows real quick. You know how in Reborn, when you get a hold of the elemental bows, a lot of them are short bows. That they're specifically bows that are there for the purpose of giving you a one-handed counter option. It's cool. They have a particular role to play. They potentially allow a lot of kind of skirmisher type builds to work. It's neat. To give you an idea, this is how it worked back in PSP. So, like, let's say you had the Camilles. It remains an elemental longbow. It's the thing that Canopus was using just now. And in his particular case, in order to make this, he would once again need to make Woots. He would need to make a Black Ice Orb, which for the purpose of not wasting your time is basically we take more of those ice things that we made before, but we now add another layer where potentially there is a 40% chance of failure to go craft that Black Ice Orb. Yes, this does mean that you potentially can just buy infinite inferior ores and infinitely crap? Yeah, I mean, you basically crap out items in this one. But you can infinitely craft orbs in the shop for infinite money. Now, depending on your base stats, if you level up your party efficiently, you basically have infinite money. If you don't, it's just going to fail more often than it'll succeed, and then you end up losing money. in theory, the concept is interesting, but the actual like play sucks. I will say that much. But in terms of redundant equipment, like what we have in this one is we have a case where you need that orb, you need the wood, so you need the steel, but additionally you need the permafrost. So you just go get a permafrost. That's the thing. You have 2 endgame ice bows in this one instead of a water bow. I don't think they actually added a water... No, there is a water bow in terms of the Centilodals. But essentially, the permafrost bow only exists as a direct upgrade for the Excamiles is effectively a direct upgrade of the permafrost. It's like, here's the shitty version, here's the good version. The permafrost is what enemy units will carry, and the thing is, you more often than not end up just wanting to recruit the unit that winds up spawning with one. It's a pretty rare chance for them to actually bring one along, and an extremely rare chance that they'll actually end up dropping it. So more often than not, you'll end up wanting to actually just recruit that unit. And again, 50% chance to fail. Like, the Wood Steel can fail, the Black Ice Orb can fail, and then finally you recruit the unit, you end up making you end up getting your permafrost bow, you go to make your Excamiles, and then it fails anyway. Like, how freaking demoralizing is that, you know? Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how that goes. So the Reborn version of this was basically just like, okay, look, you get Crescents and floors 1 to 25 in Palace of the Dead, you upgrade those to Capitos, and then you upgrade those directly to whatever bows you want. And it's a lot more convenient. So yeah, for the many folks that write comments in many older videos like, oh, I'm missing all of this old depth of the old crafting system. God, no, you did not lose a thing there, dude. What you lost is time gained. Does that even make sense to put it that way? I don't know. I don't care. But as a bit of an idea, and again, this is one of those classic examples. How do you get the best, well, arguably best, fire spear in the game? You need to complete the entire game plus Coda. So you complete Coda, and then finally you grind Coda 4, the final fight of Coda 4. You grind Magnificent 12 until finally you get the Volcatus. And then finally you have a 28% chance of success to turn that into the Ignis. Oh my god, it's so fun! Anyway. So yeah. Would not recommend. Would not recommend that version. Or would not recommend the PSP version, I should say. So, you know, there were some fun interactions in this version, and I will say, every one of those fun interactions, there's not a single one of the fun interactions from the PSP version that wasn't vastly improved on for the One Vision mod. So if you are somebody that likes those, like, nitty-gritty, weird interactions, like the only reason that you're making your, like, hash or something like that, to have your Earth Spear is so that you have a weapon that is technically Earth to improve your Earth Wizard, because technically he's training as a Knight right now, and you want to potentially raise up some ranks by having him serve as a tank for a little while before he switches over to a Warlock or something. If you like that kind of stuff, One Vision's fantastic for that. Original PSP version has some of these interesting things, but like every time that you think you have an interesting idea, there's always just this wall of, oh my god, this is gonna suck so hard behind it, you know? I mean, again, my favorite example of this is these stupid shoes, because entirety of Palace of the Dead, all I got was these damn shoes. Just like nothing else, because the drop rate sucked so hard in this version. So yeah, I think this came from like Pirate's Graveyard or something, the reeking armor. But like, yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, so that's about that. So that's hopefully an idea over just how much of an improvement the crafting system was in Reborn. Like, never call something a simplification before realizing why it was simplified in the first place. It was a vast decomplication, as I heard Titanium Legman put it once, that it's like decomplication and simplification are not the same thing. So yeah, anyways, that's about that. I gotta get going. Y'all have yourselves a good one, and take care.